I mean, there's just from the get go. Obviously, like I know you've done like an interview. I don't know how many you've done, but I've seen. Obviously, everyone always asks you about doing intro about yourself and your background, and cloud data and AI. But I kind of wanted to approach things a little bit differently. I wanted to hear a little bit around not just how you got into in this role in this industry, but a little bit around like what are some of like the catalyst moments in your life where you're like, hey, this is like something I'm good at, and what were those things that you're good at that pushed you into this direction?
What a great question, Rohan. I love the way you frame that.
Yeah.
I think there are inherent traits everyone's got that leads them in a certain direction. I'm obsessive by nature, and I want to give you a very definite example and why this obsession is healthy in my case, because obsession can have a negative connotation. But in my free time over the weekends, I used to do animation and illustration on Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. It used to be a big thing back then, and I'm talking late 90s. I wouldn't get up at times except bio breaks for 18 hours. And my mother, my siblings, my friends, they were like, "Are you okay?" That same obsession I brought to troubleshooting, incident management, developing applications, making sure they are flawless, making sure they are optimized, and customers enjoy driving their transactions on top of system. So that was attribute number one. The second one is I did a few years of back of the office work where you're just writing code, you're just developing features, you're shipping them, and the business analysts are doing all the interfacing with the users who approve it in conjunction with the product owners. And they didn't use the term product owner back then, right? That's a post agile terminology. And often, until I got into the picture, they were not fully convinced that the way these features are implemented is the way the users are going to appreciate it. So, I used to come in for clarification, and they were like, actually, next time around, can you bring Nik Jain first? Because the way he explains why he has built things a certain way together with the broader development team, that actually ticks all the boxes. So my communication skills and the way I was passionate about delivering value for the end user, that helped me bring that same sort of passion and focus into my internal customers, external customers, my team members, even in my personal life. I want to leave it there, right? Those two things: focus, excitement, and passion when engaging with people. And third is obsession and curiosity.
That's it's so interesting because obsession is fascinating. I love the tone. Whenever I think of obsession, I always think of Kobe Bryant. And I don't know if you know much
Yeah, yeah,
about
of
Kobe
course.
Bryant, rest in peace, but they talk about the fact that he was relentless in his approach, and that's one of the characteristics that probably sets winners apart in general, even more broadly speaking, outside of cybersecurity, even like as a person in order to succeed. I think one of the interesting things you mentioned there as well is around communication, because communication is, it's obviously thrown around like a lot in terms of, being an essential factor for success and in order to progress in anywhere. But I think with yourself, Nick, what really sets you apart is the fact that you have this extensive technical background. But when we spoke, I could tell, like, you can also you can also chat, we can talk over a beer, like whatever, and I think that's probably just based on my impression on what I've read and when we spoke, that's what I saw. So what I can see is that you really, and then feel free to jump in, but your ability to sort of match your technical credibility with also translating that into business value is probably what really helps you to sort of get things over the line. So I guess just wanted to ask you based on that. So you're telling me that when you have these customer meetings, they want to bring you in first. So tell me a little bit about that balance between, your technical capability, but also to sort of explain the business value as well.
Yeah, that's another great question. And Rohan, I feel everything got to start with the why. Why are we doing this? What is the value of doing this? We could be working on n number of things, but we've got finite number of people, resources, time, and focus. So you're always thinking based on prioritization. Prioritization to me becomes easy when you start with the why and and the why inherently connects with the business value for anything that needs to be done or the jobs to be done. So I think in my customer conversation, and particularly I spend a lot of time with CXOs, general managers, mostly those two personas, and they could be technology or business, I think one of the core component there is starting with the why. Why invest time here? Then talk about the what value, what does it mean for your company? What does it mean for your team? Depending on the persona you're talking about, also what does it mean personally for them? And then finally, after all of that is done, you get to the technical part, which is the how. How are you going to get this done? And how is often accompanied with case studies. Where have you done this? So it's those core segments that we often include in our customer conversation. I particularly include that in my internal or customer conversation. Start with the why. That's where you have already answered why spend time and energy and even listen to this particular conversation. And then you get into the what's and finally get to the how. But hopefully that's the type of insight you were looking for.
Definitely.
I want to add another story or segment here. Often we're traveling for work. You and I, we both got a traveling role, and you meet non-industry people. And that's the icebreaker. 99% of the conversations, the icebreaker, what do you do? I don't want to tell them I'm a CTO. I don't want to tell them I work for an AI company, all those things, because it doesn't mean anything for them. So I tell them, you're using this particular application. You use a lot of applications on a daily basis, and we just make sure those applications work. That's what my company does. That's why I have a role. They straight away understand it. Oh, yeah, sometimes the applications go slow. I'm like, we are application doctors. And they just get it. And I meet them where they are, as opposed to expect them to meet me where I am. So hopefully you can relate with that too.
Gold. That's gold. You got to meet the customer where they are, not where you are. Right. And when you meet with non-industry people, that's exactly what I do the same thing. I never see me personally and yourself. If you try something for the first time, you know what it's like to suck at something, but you also know what it's like to have 20, 30 years experience in something and to meet someone that doesn't know anything. Being able to, I guess, humble yourself in a way, that to sort of bring yourself to a level where you understand someone else's perspective is really, really important. But I guess one of the questions I had is, do you think that other people, like, because your system on why, what, and how was it? Yeah, why, what, and how is a great structure. But do you think people are not doing that? Because I feel like a lot of times people think they're doing that, but they're not really doing that. So tell me, like, what do you think separates some of the conversations you have, and what do you think are some of the gaps that you might see?
Yeah, I feel inaction. And, in the software industry and
Yeah.
any software driven business, inaction comes from a place of non understanding. What I mean by that is, we're always doing a lot of meetings. If those meetings don't speak to the why as early as possible, there is a high chance nothing's going to be done about it. And there's going to be another meeting for the meeting that was supposed to answer that why piece in the first place. And sometimes, to your point, people are too humble, too polite. They don't want to stir the hornet's nest. They don't want to ask any pointed questions. But people who value their own time, they ask these questions and they were like, okay, before we get into the hows and the whats, can someone say, why are we doing this? And I always appreciate those personas. And it's nothing to do with hierarchy, how senior your role is. It's all about, do you value your own time? And I've seen this internally at various organizations where I've worked. There might be a meeting. The meeting doesn't have an agenda. I practiced this, starting this approach a long time ago. If I get invited to a meeting where there's no agenda, I'm either going to decline or I'm going to reach out beforehand. I'm still trying to understand why I'm needed. Do you mind giving me some context? And in return, they typically come back with an agenda. Now, the second part is, when you hop on that meeting, is that agenda actually being followed? Are you deviating from the agenda? And going back to my original comment, I think if you take a lens of software vendors, we've all got solution with some value, high, medium, low. That's for the customers to decide. But if you were to generate good value for the customer, you want to start with why listen to me, why pay attention, why this is better than what you've got today. And sometimes it won't be better. So if you're not becoming a priority for the customers or the folks who need to take an action, and there is mutual value for both parties involved, think about addressing that piece as early as possible. And I would say it's a hit or miss, even for
Mm,
people who practice this principle, because we're pulled from pillar to post. We live in a busy world. There are people throwing AI buzzwords around like it's going to bring immediate value. So people quickly get into the speeds and feeds before answering why pay attention, why focus. Hopefully, I've done justice with your question and not beaten around the bush.
no, absolutely not. And because I tell you what, Nick, I feel like there's no clear agenda sometimes when people walk into a meeting, whether that's internal or external, even a customer meeting, sometimes it just starts off with a general, like sometimes it's just a discussion. Everyone has a preference style, I guess, as well. But I guess your whole point is that if we can bring the why as early as possible, then we're able to create incentive, a mutual interest for both parties to be here instead of trying to go back and forth to figure out, okay, why should we continue to talk? Is that a correct interpretation? Yeah.
That's a great summary.
Yeah. And so people aren't doing that. Is it like, do you see that? Like, what is it that, yeah. So people, what's an example of like the wrong thing to do or like what we shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't feed
There's
words.
no wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand.
And
Yeah.
I want to be respectful because I think people don't wake up and they think today I'm going to show up at work and do an average job, right? Everyone wakes up and thinks I need to do a good job. So
100%.
I think the fundamental plan and the intent is in the right place. But an example I want to give you is, let's say you're meeting a CISO of a company, a
Mm,
CTO of a company.
sure.
You've got, and not to use any swear words, but you've got an AI powered platform.
Sure.
And the AI powered platform does application security better than anything else out there.
Hmm.
I feel the cardinal sin in most cases is going straight to what your product does. The right approach is, what are your priorities? Do you even have the headspace for embarking on a valuable, high value program? And second, what have you tried? What do you have currently in your environment? How effective is that?
Mm,
And then you slowly, as you're peeling all those pieces, you present a potential business case based on your early understanding of that customer. Before you do any demos, before you even show a single slide, you just do a typical framework oriented interview. We help your persona achieve the best cybersecurity posture as mature as possible. How do we do that? We'll obviously get to that piece. We've got some unique architectural and technological patterns or frameworks and solutions. And your counterparts, depending on the vertical you're speaking to, your counterparts from those verticals have placed a bet on us.
mm,
And this is the value they're seeing. They previously had a lot of noise, a lot of redundant information, not live, mostly provided in report form on a week over week basis on request. We change all of that into a continuous and a live view. And what does that mean for this executive and their business? You answer that piece next. And on any dollar spent, you typically see, in terms of cybersecurity value terms, it's mostly risk management, posture improvement, reputation and brand protection. We typically see such and such return value. And I think the biggest difference there is I haven't shown you any slides. I haven't shown you how the product works. I've just told you what you needed to know in terms of why spend time with me. And before I even went there, I showed the curiosity and I showed the courtesy to understand if you have those problems. And Rohan, on the flip side, I've had many situations where the customer says, frankly, I don't have any outages, incidents, security problems in the last 1 year. I'm like,
mm.
fantastic, congratulations. You should be sharing with me how you're doing this. And when you do that, sometimes by virtue of humility and you're not trying to stick a product, they will say, by the way, I still want to know what you do. Show me what you
Yeah.
do.
Right.
So
So just,
hopefully
yeah. No,
that's a good feedback for yourself and the listeners.
it's interesting because even when instead because I think that's a comment when you're nervous to make a cold call, for example, like when I make a cold call, sometimes if you get nervous, you just resort to whatever you know, and then you start going into information sharing, like we do Cloudflare or whatever, right? Whichever Dynatrace, we do this, we do that, and then we just get so focused on trying to sell what we do, but we haven't even understood what is it the person wants. And priorities are so important. One of the things I'm already learning in cybersecurity is even if a business needs to change, right? Even if a business like has the even if even if I can see that this business would really benefit from what my company offers, sometimes it's just not a priority. So, and I feel like there's nothing you can do about that as well. If it's not a priority for the decision makers, then you can't really get anything over the line, right? So is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. I think we've got limited currency in terms of time and focus. And if you think at a personal level, at a company level, or a team level, it's all driven by priorities. If something is broken right now, that's highest priority.
Yeah.
If anything strategically sits on our corporate plan, on our strategic vision for, let's say, 3 years, 5 years from now, we got to make baby steps and progress towards that mission and vision. Now, to insert anything new is sacrificing something else. That's the first part we got to understand. And a good operator will always ask, is it worth having what we are discussing today in your top 5 priority? When you ask that, they are qualifying for themselves, not for you, but for themselves. And I've seen the best operators, customer teams will do that in the second or third meeting. Because until the customer understands the value you can potentially bring, there is no point in asking that question. But once you've put that question forward, it's self-validation. This could be important. And this aligns with our vision or my immediate problem sets that need to be fixed anyhow. They then fit that in. And you can remind them or anyone else from that org, because the executioners are going to be different from the strategist and the sponsor. Then you can remind the strategist and the executioners, by the way, for your CSO, your chief security officer, your CIO, this is top 5 priority. Everything changes when you mention that. If you're seeing complacency or slowdowns.
Sorry, I didn't understand that. What do you mean by top 5 priorities for CIOs?
Yeah, so my comment there was to validate with the sponsors of any project if the solution you're proposing and the program it's going to create, if it's a top 5 priority for the executive sponsor.
Mm.
And the executive sponsor, in turn, is going to do self-reflection. And once they confirm, yes, this aligns with my plans, this aligns with my immediate needs, this is a part of my office's top 5. You can then use that as a way to create faster execution, faster outcomes, not just at the C level, but the actual players who work on the project day in, day out. And that's what I've seen great customer governance model looks like, where you have that prioritization and you're part of that prioritization. Hopefully that clarifies.
I think one of the bits of gold that you dropped was if it's not a top 5 priority, like if you're having a conversation, then you have to understand that time on this means time away from those priorities. That is gold. That is gold, because then you have to justify why this fits into your priorities, right? And if anything, perhaps supersedes the priorities. Is that a fair take on what you said? Yeah.
Bullseye. Bullseye. And Ron, I
Yeah.
want to give you a very concrete example, right? A
Yeah,
simpler,
please.
smaller example. Sometimes our marketing head, even our business heads, they'll come to me and they will propose, Nik, let's kick off a solution web series where we will teach customers how to activate business analytics in context to IT observability and application security on our platform. And then in parallel, another person will come and say, let's start an internship program. So we create first-class, industry-proven pre-sales consultants that work for our company. And in parallel, I'm supporting 3 go-to-market segments with my team. I'm also dueling as a CTO for our partners, for our customer. On top of that, I'm also playing a player coach role for my team. So I often ask this question to myself, if I say yes to the web series, what am I going to stop doing? Or can I offload my weekly meetings to somebody else who can run them? And then I can say yes to this piece. So the same thing is being done by companies, their executives, the teams we approach for positioning new solutions. They may be superior, but the question they are often asking themselves is, how can I fit this in?
It's almost that's so fascinating. It's almost got nothing to do with if it's a better solution or not. It's all good about timing. Timing in terms of where the priorities are for the business and the decision makers.
Well said. Yeah, you could have the best solution in the planet.
Yeah.
They don't have resource. And I've seen often the best of projects are on standby for a program manager or a project manager to be onboarded. Once the project manager is onboarded, it could be 6 months from now, 9 months from now, the program actually kicks off. They already understand the value, but they're unable to move.
Wow. And that's when you start getting into that and deep into that enterprise territory where it's almost like, great, we got a solution. It's exactly what we need. Now time for everything else, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, please.
No, you go.
I I mean, how much do you think? Like now, obviously, it's case by case, but and I'm just going to ask you when with these types of because it sounds like we're talking about large enterprises.
It applies to any companies
Any,
out
yeah,
there. But often shadow IT happens because you get a overly enthusiastic practitioner or team manager who wants to try new things, or they have a burning problem that they just got to solve. But when you look from a higher level lens, that priority for this team is not a corporate priority. So my response would be it applies to everybody, but then there are always going to be exceptions. People will break the exceptions for exploration, for fixing a small problem, or for trying something new because it's adventurous to get on a new journey. So I wouldn't put a blanket yes, no on this. I would rather go with a gray.
right, yeah, it's case by case. And one of the other things I wanted to, so that's a very fascinating perspective. I think I certainly learned a few things just then as well. So thank you so much. One of the things I was going to ask you is you mentioned five priorities. Is that just because five's a magic number, or is that an actual like reason behind five priorities for someone in a CTO C-suite role?
You picked up something interesting there. It was actually based on the common feedback I get on priorities from CXOs and even general managers. And because they have a large team, some of the teams we work with or executives we work with, they can range from they've got 9,000
Yeah.
to some of them, they've got a couple of hundred IT staff. Depending on the size of their resourcing, their division, they are able to take anywhere between 3 to 5 and sometimes even 10 priorities because they can distribute them. But the magic number is not 3, which is what we are led to believe, right? Power of 3 priorities. I've generally seen the magic number stands between 3 to 5. That's the more common feedback I get. We're currently working on these top 5 things. That's what I keep hearing time and time again.
That's interesting. Magic number of five. Okay, I'm glad I asked that because I mean I never thought about it. It's now when I jump on a call with a general manager, CXO, or any sort of C-suite in the tech space, I'm going to be thinking, okay, well, what's the priorities for this person? I'll do my research. I'll figure out, okay, where's the business moving? What do the financial reports say? What's he posting on LinkedIn? Make a guess on the five. Like I'm just hypothesizing here. Make a guess on the five priorities, and I'm going to be thinking, okay, well, does this value that I'm creating here through my business, can this justify into these potentially five priorities for this person? And if not, then I should probably reassess how I explain the value before I go and reach out to the person.
Well said, Rohan. And I'll think in this sense, maybe their top 5 priorities. And let's say you're positioning a cybersecurity solution, which is all about protecting that brand, its marketplace, its revenue lines, its customers. I'm positioning an analytics tool. Now, and both of us approach the same executive team and company.
Mhm.
Now, what their top 5 priorities are merger and acquisition from a technology standpoint.
Yeah.
Second, they're thinking about consolidating, reducing OpEx. Third, they're thinking about new products, launching new products. Fourth, they're thinking about a restructure. Will security be more critical or analytics? Chances are they're going to look at these are my top 5 priorities.
Mhm.
And generally, from what I understand, we're driven by fear of something bad happening, then celebration of something great happening. So there's a higher chance security will take a priority, not analytics. But what we want them to do is when we're explaining to them the value, we want to do some research on what are they currently busy with, validate if this executive is busy with the same things that it says publicly or through some champions. And then when you're explaining the value of your platform, you're indirectly saying you're launching new products, but don't you feel securing your brand, protecting your users and your revenue lines is equally important? And then let them decide. They'll come back to you and they'll say, yeah, you're actually right. We got to put more effort here because even our board is saying, let's make sure we don't have cyber incidents. And yeah, you want them to go through that decision making themselves.
That's a fascinating perspective. You know what's so funny about that? I was going to mention, there's two things I was going to mention on the back of that. One was I was at lunch yesterday with one of my colleagues, and we were just talking about the fact that when you're trying to build good habits, it's easy if you want to build good habits, it's easier to have consequences for the bad habits than to have rewards for the good habits, if that makes sense. So he was telling me that he's a jiu-jitsu champion in New Zealand. He was telling me that when he had to do weight cuts, his brother and him would do a bet and say that if you don't follow your diet, we're gonna shave your eyebrows off. And they're brothers, so they tell each other everything. And I was telling him, I said, well, can you also do like a positive reinforcement? But the thing is, which comes back to your original point about justifying cybersecurity, is that the risk factor of losing, the consequence is far more important to people than the benefits of potentially winning. So that's just something I caught. If you're trying to justify the priorities to a business, then cybersecurity is definitely there because people, the consequence of something is very important to people.
Yeah.
It's the only the other thing I was going to mention is that, talk about the fact that when we want to sort of create that, sort of explain that consequence to them in a way that we ask them if this is important, right? If is this important to you, instead of telling them, is this important to you? That's something I've realized very recently as well when you're in customer meetings as well, right? You're instead of you know the answer, right? But you should ask in order for sometimes for people to reach the right conclusion. You don't want to tell them this is the consequence, this can happen to you. You kind of want to approach it from a perspective of understanding and asking and hoping that they reach the same conclusion that you reached.
Yeah, spot on. And there are business frameworks. Even when you're doing performance management, you're trying to uplift or you're aiming to uplift the quality of output from certain teams. They say don't solve the or create the pathway on how they're going to do better. Let them create the pathway because they're going to
Right.
be more committed.
Yeah.
So connecting it back to what you said, when they validate this should be a priority, rather than you telling them it's a priority for most CISOs or CTOs, is going to be more powerful than when they viscerally, internally realize this should be one of my priorities. They're going to be more committed to that cause.
And is there any so I think you briefly touched on it, but is there a way to sort of go about that? Is it more of a mindset, tonality? Like what do you think is the secret sauce?
I think the secret sauce is not answering, but asking questions and
Right.
asking really, really good questions. Like when we're even thinking about, and I'll take the lens of our projects in my current role, we often ask the customer to visually imagine when was the last time a major incident, outage, degradation happened? How did you feel? What course of action did you take? How much time did it take? Did you do a retrospective? And then they almost start sharing with you narratives from that time. Oh, by the way,
Mm.
a network outage happened. 200 people were involved from our technology teams. It took us 4 days to close that issue. It took us another 80 hours to come up with the retrospective. And without saying you want to do ROI or value assessment, they're already sharing all these details with you, which is good. Now, when you're running your demonstrations or you're putting a value assessment together, by the way, this is what you shared for your critical incidents. Can I just ask you one last thing? How many of these incidents happen in a given year? Let's say it's 12. So you've already, with those line of questions, not answers, you have helped them walk down the memory lane and feel that pain once more.
Mm.
You've also gotten a lot of input for the value assessment. Now, when you run your demonstrations and you put together a value assessment at a high level, you've got all the key data points and it will accelerate stuff because they were like, yep, this is my data. These are not industry averages or assumed numbers. And when you're doing the demos, you remember that process that took you 4 days. Click here, it will generate the first version for you immediately in 2 minutes. So you go from 80 hours to 2 minutes. I'm not saying this is the final piece. Now you got to hone it and you got to personalize it. That may take you another half an hour. It surely is not going to take you 80 hours. So the crux of my response is questions are more powerful rather than providing responses and answers. Once you've asked those questions, framed them, you've gotten some feedback, then you can finally start answering. Sort of like a doctor.
It's exactly the perfect analogy. A doctor is exactly what you're doing. And that's how I talk sometimes with prospects, with customers. I talk like I'm trying to diagnose your problem and I'm trying to get all the information. It's a total win-win. By asking questions, I'm getting more information about your situation, which helps me to position certain use cases. And for you, it's running the customer or the prospect through that pain again, just like you're telling me. So like that's and I can see that as you get further down the sales cycle, that's all of these questions that you're building up, all this information you're gathering is just helping you to formulate that one powerful value proposition that you make to the customer that just really sits well. Is that a fair like judgment on the whole process?
100%. And some
Yeah.
sales trainers or consulting trainers will call it pressing in the wounds.
Yeah.
Personally, don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't want to press in anyone's wound.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
Yeah.
Let's not train people to do that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think walking down the memory lane is a better way to
Yeah.
say it. Let's reimagine the pain you felt and the challenges you felt.
Yeah. Not in a toxic way.
Yeah.
We're not trying to put salt in your wound. We just want
Yeah.
you to look at it, and assess it properly. Like this is not good. You need to fix this. Totally. Nick, I had so many questions for you. Like I kid you not. We literally went so much in depth in terms of the customer conversations, just from the technical and the business value. And we went on this incredibly like just this tangent, but with like gems throughout. I feel I wanted to talk to you about AI. Maybe we can definitely do another session. There's no doubt about it later down the line. But I guess if I had any closing question, I guess I would just ask you something a little bit more general and a little bit more about just professionalism and professional work life. You've obviously been professionally working for a number of years now. I just had a question around, obviously right now it's Men's Mental Health Month. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Yes.
It's November. So I just wanted to ask you around things like burnout, stress, and longevity in your role. Like, how do you manage these things, especially in like a leadership role?
Oh, that is supreme. I firstly appreciate that you didn't ask me to introduce myself. I think 99.99% people dread that question because they
Yeah.
feel the inherent pressure to do justice with the question. And I'm so glad we got that out of the way and we went straight for what makes you you, what
Yeah.
uniquely makes you you. And now for a full circle and to close the conversation, you've asked me another fantastic question on how do you stay on top of the game. And second part I understood is there's obviously so much pressure and you want to deliver high value. So how do you stay fit for being able to do that? And there are two parts. Burnouts are real. And I think a good leader will not just ask for verbal cues, verbal feedback. Are you feeling a burnout? You can observe these things.
Hmm.
And observation is very powerful, right? Just keep an eye on how the projects are going, how different integrated account teams are performing, where do they want you to play a role. And when you sense burnout, in my case, I typically recommend, even if it's a Friday and I sense someone is burning out, I'll tell them Monday, take a day off.
Hmm.
And they're like, can I? And I'm like, hell yeah. You can. You did some sensational work this week. Let's make sure you come back on Tuesday feeling a bit fresher, if not
Hmm.
fresh. And they appreciate that. So that's on how you manage it for other people. And you often remind people, look, why I'm recommending you need to take a break is not because you think you need a break. We all need a break from time to time. And in
Hmm.
my case, I do multiple small holidays throughout the year.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
strategy number one. I encourage the same feedback for other people.
Hmm.
Take multiple short breaks, long weekends. I think in our part of the world, we are really good at taking long weekends. And that is a great culture. It speaks to the health of our working environments as well. The second thing I do is just staying fit.
Hmm.
Not having Slack, Outlook on my phone. I don't install those applications. It's yet another way of getting busy no matter where you are. So delete those apps. And when you're doing work, you're fully there. When you're doing other things, you're fully there.
Hmm.
And focusing a little bit on fitness. taking a walk, hitting the gym, reading is another great way. Gardening to me is another great way. But I'll leave it at that. I'm obviously learning. I ask the same questions to people who are way more busy than me, and they will often say delegation. But delegation means you're handing it over to somebody else, and
else.
they might.
Burnout. Oh, that's so funny. It's funny. You ask others, I'm asking you. It's like this never-ending journey. We're all trying to figure it out, right? Also, I don't know anyone who works harder than you. Who works harder than you, Nick? I think you're always somewhere across the country. I'm always seeing something. I'm like, oh, Nick's here now. Okay, wonderful.
Who works harder than me? Wow. I think there are a lot of hard and smart worker.
That's what I think about you. So I don't know what if you're saying that about others. I don't know what that means. Where I lie in this whole spectrum.
No,
Nick.
no, no. I think it's I think most people that I work with, they work hard, and I think they
Yeah,
work smart as well.
yeah,
I'm just gonna say my better half, she definitely my wife.
yeah.
She is definitely, she can balance a lot of different things.
Mm.
I really admire how hard she works. I'll leave it there, without delving into too many details.
That it's the best. It's the best answer you could have given. Yeah, we spoke as well. Like, when we spoke, she's a very smart lady as well. So yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. Nick, thank you so much for your time today. I think we touched on so many gems, super valuable stuff to people, sort of anywhere in their journey in cybersecurity, both from a seller side, but also from someone that's also buying in terms of what are my priorities. So, you know, I think we really touched really well on both sides. So there's learnings for everyone. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, Ron. Thanks for having me. And I really enjoyed that. We didn't bore everyone mindless and ourselves talking about AI and automation. I mean, those are great, great trends. I think we'll continue to make progress on those fronts. We've been on that journey for tens of years, decades. It's nothing new. And I really enjoyed the conversation, and I got a lot of mutual value as well, return value. So thanks for that.